The stage is all
Hello.
yours.
Thank you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to my talk, wAIred. To learn with or without AI? That is the question. And this morning, we actually heard all about implementing AI into your IT solutions, right? But now we're going to focus on your development and on how you are using AI in your daily work. Now, I was quite shocked to hear you saying that there's about 10% adoption rate, and I expect this rate to be a lot higher in this room. Can I see some hands on the people that use AI daily for work purposes? So daily in their work purposes. Look at that, more than 10% at least. we're doing good, people. So because today's talk will be about how you use it, I added this little subtitle, especially for today, to code with or without AI. So for today's program, we're having a learning path, and we're walking that path together. And I think the most important question we want to start with is AI making us smarter? Because that is kind of the biggest question here. I feel that is most important for our own development, right? Where do we stand as people, as humans, as experts in 5 years from now? Then if we have an answer to that question, we continue with the impact that AI has on your learning capabilities. And when we uncover that, we try to round it up, find the balance in working with AI, but still having your own human intelligence. All right, let's start with the first question. Is AI making us smarter? Now, I know this is a highly opinionated question, and I probably expect that most of you have a strong opinion about this. Maybe you have this gut feeling, this sentiment towards it. But luckily for us, we can step away from sentiment for a bit. We're going to look at scientific research. Isn't that nice? So in the first research I want to go over with you guys, we're looking at a research where they basically stated that AI is closing the gap between lower performing people and higher performing people. So what they did in this research is they asked all participants to do a couple of tasks. Some tasks were done without the use of AI, and some were done with the use of AI. Now, after everybody filled in the tasks, only then was the group divided based on their scores. So we got a lower half of scores and a top half of scores. Now, if you would compare the average score of the bottom half of scores for the task done without AI, and you would compare them to the top half, it's a difference of approximately 22%. So quite a big gap, right? 1/4, 1/5 of a difference between the lower performing and the higher performing. But when you look at tasks that were done with AI, that difference shrank to approximately 4.5%. So that's huge, right? And if we dive in then a little bit deeper, we see that the bottom half of scores actually grew with an average of about 43%, and the top half of scores grew with about 13 or 17%. Still quite decent. I would sign for having a 17% increase of quality, or not quality, but of score, but still not as huge as with the bottom half of scores, right? So if we look at this research, we can basically say, okay, AI is great, especially for juniors, novice people, people that struggle, and that's that. So with that, I wanted to close my talk. Thank you so much for listening. I think we all gain so much out of it, and that's it. No, right? Because even though this research is very useful, it does only say something about the short-term outcome. It does only say something about the score in this moment of time for this task. If we draw the line towards IT solution, it doesn't really say anything about the quality of the outcome, right? It just said something if it was accurate. It doesn't really say anything about the maintainability over time. So actually, another research stated that while AI can help a junior developer finish a basic task approximately 35% faster, it does make the final product less maintainable over time. And actually, Stanford's economy lab is supporting that because they stated AI-generated code tends to be simpler, more repetitive, and less structurally diverse. Now, if you don't know that much about IT code, you might think, oh, that's nice. Like, simpler code is good, right? But it makes the product less robust and therefore less viable over time. And Cast Software actually supports this because they saw the 4-time increase of code cloning. So what I mean, or what they mean with that, is that if we as developers create a utility method, then we know that method exists and we use it for several methods to call on it, right? But with AI, if you ask it to come up with a solution, it just creates a new method for that. And it does that again and again because it doesn't have the complete overview of everything that's already existing, and it just wants to satisfy your question. So it doesn't really look at making elegant code, so to say. But still, it wasn't really answering that big first question, is AI making us smarter, right? So for that, I wanted to look at the second research. And this research was done in a time before AI, but still relevant, I will promise you that. It was conducted over the course of 11 years, so a very decent long-term research. And what they did here is they followed this group of students and asked them to conduct several questionnaires throughout the course of a study course. And you don't need to memorize all those numbers by heart. Let's just look at the totals. The group was then divided based on the type of homework style that the students had. So you got the copiers who were looking for the answers of their homework questions online and were simply copy-pasting them from an external tool. And you got the generators who answered the homework questions by critical thinking and problem-solving skill and knowledge that they obtained throughout the course. So as you can see, the copiers are starting off flying high, right? They have a tremendous score even before a single lesson was given. That's pretty successful, you would say, but it also makes sense, right? Because they didn't really need to learn anything. They could basically search for the answers online and still got a good score. Very different from the generators who are starting off way lower because they didn't conduct in the course yet. But over time, the generators, you can see slowly but steadily, the score increases and they actually retrieve the highest score at the end of the course during their exams. So because of this line that you see here, you can say something about the indication that it gives on the retention of that knowledge over time. And that it will be more likely that the generators will hold on to that knowledge after the course has finished. Very different from the copiers who are actually ending off with a lower score than what they started off with before the course was starting. Now, even though this was done in a time before AI, it does still give an implication on the impact that it has when we use external tools to copy-paste our answers, right? All right, but for fun, and because it's relevant, let's look at some research that did involve AI. So in last summer, this research paper came out, and what they did here is they asked all participants to write an essay. And when they were writing the essay, they got like electronics on their heads, and they were measuring the brain waves throughout the writing of that essay. Now, the group was divided in 3. One group could use ChatGPT, an LLM. One group could use a search engine, and one group didn't have access to any external tool and just needed to rely on their own cognitive capabilities. Now, as you can see from the bottom half, like the bottom brain images that you see here, I'm not sure how well you can see it, but the more orange or red a line gets, the more significant or the more energy was detected in that brainwave. And if you also can see, the LLM group has one very significant line, the search engine 2, but the brain has actually 5 pretty significant lines. So you can already see from this graph that the brain-only group was using their cognitive capabilities a lot more than the people using the external tools. But in order to really understand the impact of it, we need to understand a little bit about brainwaves. Now, brainwaves can be measured in different frequency bands. And every frequency band is associated with their own cognitive functions or specialisms, so to say. So when we detect certain brain waves in a certain band, we can say something about the energy that was spent in that specific area. Makes sense, right? So the first frequency band we distinguish is a band that has everything to do with information retrieval. And when we compare here the brain-only group to the search engine group and then the LLM group, we saw a clear downward trend. Which makes sense, right? Because if you only have your brain to rely on, you continuously need to search your own memory in order to find any content to put on paper, right? Like you need to produce an essay, so you need to fetch everything from your own brain. Whereas if you have access to an external tool, you're less busy with finding that information internally. You can just offload it to the external tool, right? Even though you might still have known the answers, but it's easier sometimes to use the external tool, right? So the second brain frequency band we distinguish has everything to do with planning, and especially sensory motory planning. So how you plan for your senses to act. So basically, the moment when an LLM group started scrolling through the answers of the ChatGPT bot, then you saw heightened activity here. But overall, again, the brain-only group showed a lot higher, and it was a clear downward trend towards the different external tools. And that makes sense because if you need to type your entire essay because you cannot copy-paste, you're continuously busy with creating an internal plan and putting your thoughts literally into words, right? Whereas if you can use the external tool, depending on the tool you use, you can more offload, like you can copy-paste more bits and pieces of that. Now, the third frequency band has everything to do with deep focus. Now, I want you to think for a moment about the last time when you were really into that nice flow. Especially for the developers, think about the last time that you were killing it. You had like this really deep focus, you were not distracted, you had all your cognitive capability set on that one goal. That was probably because no one was ringing your teams, right? You were not distracted by any agenda meetings popping up or emails coming by. Maybe your phone was in another room or dead. Basically, the less distractions you have, the more deep focus you can gain. And because whenever you use an external tool, your train of thought is continuously being disrupted by the output of the tool, and you also sometimes need to switch from one to the other. So we could see here with writing the essay that the brain-only group showed deeper levels of deep focus than the other two. And then last but not least, cognitive load. Now, cognitive load has everything to do with the actual thinking. So the fact that you want to compare new input to the knowledge that you already obtained, right, in order to make a solution, for example. Now, again, we saw that if you use external tools, you use less cognitive load. But in this sense, it's actually a positive thing. Because if you have more cognitive load to spare, you can actually use that in order to reflect on your essay so far, maybe go into more complex matters of the essay, go the extra mile, basically. However, it's up to the person to decide what to do with that space, right? It's not a given that if you have cognitive load to spare, that you will use it for good. You can also just be lazy and think like, that was easy, right? Like, it's up to the person, very personal thing. So back to that question, is AI making us smarter? We saw from these three researchers that performance definitely goes up, at least in the short term. Not talking about maintainability over time, but in the short term, productivity seems to go up. But cognitive performances, they seem to go down. So yes, you can produce a lot more output in a faster period of time, but research suggests that the chances of you becoming smarter or just as smart as you would without the use of AI isn't a given, and it takes work. So that's actually why I wanted to move on to the second part of this talk. The impact that AI has on our learning capabilities, because it's up to us on how we use AI. And before we really dive into the positive side of things, I just want to continue downwards on this negativity train. Sorry for that, but I think it's important because AI came flying in, right? It was there with a burst. It was all around us, and also thank you to Rabobank, but we got enabled quite quickly, right? At least in our tribe. We could use it quite fast. And it's like putting a kid in a candy store, right? Like, if you don't teach it that it shouldn't overeat, it will just eat everything because everything is tasty and everything is nice. But is it healthy for the person? Will they be nauseous afterwards? Not so much, right? So that's why I wanted to focus on the concerns before. There will be also positive sides of it. All right, so the first risk I wanted to highlight is becoming over-reliant on AI. Here, the principle falling asleep at the wheel takes action. And this principle basically states that we let AI take over instead of using it as a tool. So you are not in control anymore, AI is in control. And luckily for us, it's not based on my own gut feeling. We again have research to back this up, that falling asleep at the wheel is a serious risk that we need to take into account. But before I can show you that research, I want to introduce you to a term. And that term is called the frontier. Now, a frontier is a boundary, and it often refers to what is known and what is unknown. Now, normally, in a normal situation, the more difficult the task gets, the less likely you are to succeed, right? So a steady decrease of the frontier. It's predictable, it makes sense, it's what we all know. However, in AI, that frontier is jagged, and it refers to the ever-changing and unpredictable nature of AI. So if you have two tasks that you feel are evenly difficult from your own expertise, from your own experience, then it can very well be that one of these questions can be solved by the AI with ease, very high accuracy rate, whereas the other one ends up in hallucinations and errors. Let alone, it can even be that you ask the same question, and one time it answers it with high accuracy, and the other time it ends up in hallucinations, right? So that's why we need to learn the shape of that jagged frontier. And we can only do that through experience, because it's not something that we have learned so far. So only through experience, working with AI, we can learn the shape of the jagged frontier, and we learn gradually how it's built up. All right, so you probably remember, it was not too long ago that I showed you guys about this research, right? And this research was deliberately designed, like the task with AI, were deliberately designed to be within the jagged frontier. So the researchers really took the time to create tasks that had a high success rate whenever they were asked to AI. But what would happen if we make questions that are outside of the jagged frontier? What would then happen? And this research is actually stunning, and I hope that you, if you take anything with you at home, that you take this with you. Because in this next research, the researchers made questions that were deliberately complex, ambiguous, and required a high level of human intelligence and creativity. And what you can see here is stunning, right? The control group, so the group that didn't have access to AI, scored significantly higher than the group that had access to AI. And that is stunning because the group that did have access to AI didn't lack anything, right? They still had their own brains, it was still there. They only had more tools. They had more tools than the other group. But this is where you see falling asleep at the wheel in action. Because it's so much harder to keep thinking critically in the same way without AI, right? All right, so for the second risk, I want to focus on biases and errors. Now, we all know that AI has been trained on gigantic masses of data, mostly coming from the internet. Christine already talked about it, right? It goes further than our racial or gender biases, but when we draw it to IT, it's also about IT solutions, right? Simply because some IT solutions are more present on the internet than others. And if clouded judgment and biases aren't already bad enough, there's also another risk. Because if you take certain falsehoods, hallucinations, biases, doesn't matter. If you take that as a truth, because you are not validating it, because you're not able to critically think about it or to reject it, then you can take those as the future foundation for future decisions and learnings, right? Because that is then in your long-term memory. And I'm not sure about you, but I find it pretty hard to unlearn things. So it would be great if we can already take this into account. Now, the research with the brainwaves, so the third research, right, with the essays, they also looked into biases. And not so much like if an essay is correct or false, but just the impact that the usage of an external tool has on the bias towards that essay. Now, after everybody handed in their essay, they were comparing the amount of overlap of unique words used within that certain group of participants. And a higher score here means a greater overlap in choice of words within participants of that same group. Now, as you can see, the group that used LLMs used a lot more similar words among the participants in that group. Doesn't make the essay false. It's not saying that the essay isn't accurate or correct, but it does say something about the biases that slip in, even though they are not always risky, but it's good to be aware of. Now, you might ask, okay, Simone, that's all nice and dandy, but what is the risk now, right? Every LLM version is so much better than its predecessor. We now even got a trophic coming by, right? Like the future predictions are amazing. So in a couple of years, right, like the accuracy rate will be out of this roof. So should we worry about it? Now, in this research, they asked the AI to conduct a medical exam. And the medical exam was also given to university students in the medical field. Now, as you can see, for the scores that score really high, they are all about facts. Multiple choice questions, some about anatomy, stuff like that. But there are also two outliers, right? And the two outliers score half of the points. And they have everything to do with reasoning, with questions that are outside of the Jagged Frontier, right? They require complexity. They require multidisciplinary view. They need to compare and integrate several stuff. And you can still see that here, if it's rated by tutors and professors, that it doesn't score as high yet. I'm not saying that these numbers will be the same in 5 years from now, because as you can see with GPT-4, it already made quite a staggering improvement, right? But we're not there yet. And we should, at least for now, be cautious of what we do. Actually, I want to dare to make a bold statement. The more accurate the LLM gets, the more risky it also gets, because it's harder to detect the hallucinations, right? The more accurate it gets, the harder it is to detect the faults that remain. And that's why we need to validate the AI's output with everything we do. First of all, because it ensures us, of course, the accuracy and the reliability, because AI will sound valid, even though it's wrong. We all have been there, right, at one point or another. It will always try to make you feel like it's the best solution in the world. Secondly, because it detects hallucinations and biases before it slips in to your code, or even worse, to your long-term memory. And then last but not least, this actually can promote your critical thinking. So back to the question, is AI making us smarter? If you validate it, if you work it, integrate it, it can make you smarter, because you're continuously triggering yourself to think beyond a certain output, right? And in that sense, you improve your current knowledge and also the critical thinking, which is an essential skill for any developer to have. Then the third concern I want to make is retention and recollection of information. Now, we saw in the beginning that people that use external tools often have more cognitive load to spare, right? And we can use that in several ways, for the good and for the bad, I guess. And that's actually what the researchers of the brainwave research also saw. They actually state in their conclusion the following: this suggests that while AI tools can enhance productivity, they may also promote a form of metacognitive laziness. Let that sink in. It's brain atrophy, actually. I learned that word from you, but like it's the diminishing, right, of your brain muscles. And again, they're scientists, right? So they based it on something. So they based it on the following. After everybody handed in their essay, then the researchers asked, okay, can you make a quote of any sentence of the article that you wrote minutes before? And the outcome speaks for itself. The LLM group struggled significantly with quoting a single sentence of the article they wrote. But take that even further, because the researchers, of course, also validated then afterwards, was that quote actually correct? There was not a single person of the LLM group that could make a correct quote out of the essay they wrote minutes before. And this research doesn't look into long-term memory capabilities, but the fact that it didn't make its way into the short-term memory does give an indication on if it will ever end up in the long-term memory, right? So over time, when we work with AI for many years, this reliance could seriously harm our problem-solving skills. Why? Because we might become so dependent on AI that we stop learning the new knowledge and new informations for ourselves. So we actually need to be careful of offloading the thinking to the AI and keep strengthening our own cognitive muscles. All right, we've been there. We reached the pit of negativity. We're now going to crawl our way out of this pit, and we're going to see, hopefully, the sun and the light of day, and look at some positive things. So the first positive thing that I wanted to state is the fact that AI is a great idea generator. Assuming that I don't tell anything new. AI can generate any suggestions, options, contributions in seconds, right? And that's great, mainly because we, as humans, all have our own blinders, right? We only know what we know based on our current experience. But if you have access to AI, just as you would have if you have access to colleagues, it would open up your horizon, right? It opens your blindness. It makes you aware of new perspectives, different perspectives. And when you've made aware of that, you can actually reflect on yourself. So why didn't you know this beforehand? Was it simply because the information never got offered to you? Or do you have pre-assumptions about this, which made it feel less like a good fit? You can basically reflect and become a more open-minded person for it. And last but not least, it can increase creativity. Do mind the word "it can," because if you ask the AI something and you take that output and just use it right away, it doesn't enhance your creativity, right? It basically only says something about the creativity of the tool. But the moment that you want to enhance creativity, you want to interact with it and use it as this ping pong machine, right? You want to trigger it, or you want it to let you be triggered to think further, to go beyond. So use it to interact with each other. Don't stop at the very first answer you get. And in that sense, I want to urge you, stop using AI as a shortcut and start using it as an exploration tool. All right, the second opportunity that we can distinguish is personalized learning. Nowadays, a lot of people struggle with finding the time, finding the focus, finding the motivation to have a learning. Nowadays, we can do anything. And I'm not only talking about work things, but like also when our work is finished, right? We can go to the pub, we can take the train, we can go here, we can go there. Our worlds are so big normally. But because of that, it is hard to learn because we have so much other things we can do in that same time. So AI can actually really help with that because first of all, it's 24/7 available. So if you feel inspired, if you feel, hey, this is really the right time for me to learn, you don't need to wait for a tutor. You can start right away, right? And if you participate in a course, often the course is more or likely made for the entire group, right? So you can have small changes here and there, but mostly most people follow the same trajectory. However, with AI, you can really tailor to your personal needs. Are you a person that likes to learn through learning? Then here you go. Here's this entire course made up out of levels with challenges and quests, especially for you to keep your focus. Are you a person that likes to learn while walking, so through podcasts? Okay, give me your articles and I will make a podcast out of it, right? So you can tailor to your niche. You can tailor to your personal learning style. And last but not least, it will increase because of that motivation. And do not underestimate motivation, because if there is no motivation, there will not be a successful learning experience, because you will block that learning experience for yourself, either because you don't have the time or because it doesn't sink in because you're not engaged enough. Then the third opportunity is efficiency and productivity. Well, we already seen it in the beginning, right? AI creates a lot of output. It makes sure that, at least in the short term, you finish your tasks faster. And it can remove some tedious tasks, right? Especially if you're a more senior developer, you can take some stuff out of your hands so that you can focus on the more complex tasks at hand. Because the less cognitive load that you need, the more you can focus on those complexity of the task, right? You can focus on things that were maybe beforehand a little bit out of reach because it felt like one level above you, but now you have more availability, like you can boil it down more. You can maybe use it more to interact and actually gain a learning out of it and enhance your current level. So let me quickly sum this up. If we look at the broader overview, we saw three concerns, right? The over-reliance, the biases and errors, and the retention and recall. But for the opportunities, we saw the idea generator, the personalized learning, and the efficiency and productivity. Now, after we've seen all of these impacts, how do we continue? Because even though there were some nice positive notes, there were also quite a few big concerns, especially if we look at our own personalized learning or on our own personalized learning path, right? So how can we balance the two? How can we balance AI with human intelligence? Well, the first step I want to make, and what I want to urge you, is find your source of truth. AI is not a source of truth. It is not written by any author. It is not reviewed by any knowledgeable peers, by any professor. It is a prediction tool. Christina already explained all about it, right? And we need subject matter expertise in order to think critically, to problem solve, but also to validate the AI's output, right? If we ask it something that's way above our league, how are we ever going to validate if that's actually the right solution? Now, secondly, invite AI to everything you do. Now, I might imagine that some of you say, okay, this is very counterintuitive towards the rest of your presentation. But I do mean it, and I actually love AI myself. I use it also daily for both work and personalized things. But you need to learn that shape of the jagged frontier, and you can only do that through experience, because through experience, to failure, to trial and error, you will learn the shape of the jagged frontier. And also, very importantly, we didn't really talk about it yet, but is to learn how to prompt, right? Because if you're using AI also for personalized things, I can imagine, or I would imagine, that you use it very differently in the way you address your questions than you would do during work, right? Because if I ask the AI to come up with a recipe, I just do it as I would write a text message, right? But if you use it for your IT solutions, then make sure that you know about prompt engineering. Make sure that you use structurized formats to ask your question and to get a structurized response of that. And also, it's a lot more important to validate the sources with your IT solution than it is for your recipe, right? So do imagine that whenever you invite AI, which I would highly suggest, think of it as an infinite fast interns. And interns are super motivated, right? They're energetic. They want to do the job. They want to serve. But they're also prone to bending the truth and making errors, simply because they don't know better. So the last step is accountability. Because if we balance AI with human intelligence, do we also then balance accountability? How much of the product that we deliver with AI is our accountability, and how much of it is the accountability of the AI? Now, in this research, or actually a report of Veracode that came out in October last year, we saw that even though the syntax pass rate, so the fact if code compiles yes or no, is pretty high, the security rate of it is still very low at this moment in time. So you can see that approximately 45% of AI contains OWASP top 10 vulnerabilities. And actually, if we then look at Java specifically, Java is not the best in class. Actually, it's the worst in class at this moment when you look for AI solutions. So at this moment, whenever you ask the Copilot to come up with implementations, there are very high risk of security issues slipping in. Now, not to worry, because actually I've heard that last week, Cerebro created this building block together with Team Strongbow. Woo! And you can now subscribe to that building block, and then you get custom instructions that are specifically designed to make your Copilot output be more secure. So that's one way where you can start with, right? But okay, let's get back to the question accountability. Who is accountable? I think what we've seen from the last slide, that we can't really hold AI accountable, right? So we need to hold ourselves accountable. You are accountable for the code you deliver, so which you submit in a PR, but you're also accountable for the code you review. And I want to make a big point out of this, because you can imagine that all of your colleagues also use AI agents, right? And we also saw that it's so much harder to think critically in the same way we do without AI. So keep each other sharp. Be sure that the reviews don't take shorter amount of time than before AI, but maybe even a bit longer. Dive into it a little bit deeper. Do you understand it? Are you sure that this is what you want to let go to production? So to sum it up, verify the AI's output. Make sure there are human reviewers involved. Avoid blind copy-pasting, and make sure that you grow and learn along the way, because you don't want to stagger at this moment in time, right? We want to grow as people. So let's look at the key takeaways. First of all, keep questioning the answers of the AI so that you don't fall asleep at the wheel. Secondly, in case of very complex or tasks that require a lot of reasoning, consider maybe not using AI. It is an option. Then thirdly, validate the AI's output, right? We've seen why it's so important. Then use AI as a tutor. So instead of letting it bite you in the... You now use it to strengthen your own skills, right? To improve yourself, to gain that extra knowledge, to go the extra mile. And then last but not least, find your source of truth. And then last but not least, hold yourself accountable. And with that being said, these are my sources. Sorry for that. I will have the slides at the last stage. Here you can find my slide deck, and with that also the key takeaways. Thank you so much. I work also here at Rabobank, so if you want to hook up, just give me a Teams chat. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Simone. I think I speak for many in the room when I say we were hanging by your lips. So thank you for all the energy, everything you brought. I heard Team Smile was whispered into my ear. So, oh look, we got the fan club on the first row.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Nice, that's real teammates.
This is good support. This is also where the applause came from earlier. Now I see Team Smile, it is for the win. No favorites here whatsoever. Simone, you shared so much, and I think it's so incredible. I was so curious, like taking everything that you shared. Would you say that there is a rule of thumb that people could use and apply to sort of know when they should opt for, getting help from AI, or when they should sort of opt to thinking themselves?
Well, that's a good question. I think as a general rule of thumb, especially because you're like what I said, right? It's often good to invite AI at least to the table, to invite it with everything you do. But where you need to have the rule of thumb, if it will bite you, is are you able afterwards, if you have the solution that you're happy with, are you able to produce or explain the solution to your colleague without the code in front of you? Do you understand the concept and the domain? And same for syntax, right? Whenever you wrote your solution with the use of AI or with automatic code completion, are you then afterwards able to reproduce it slightly, right? It doesn't need to be letter by letter, but do you understand the core concept of the syntax, and can you reproduce it in another class, in another syntax, in another sandbox?
Right, because there is a fine line. The reason I'm asking is because when does it sort of like aid you in the process of developing something, and when does AI replace your thinking? But you're saying a good rule of thumb then, if I understand correctly, is sort of like asking yourself afterwards, could I reiterate this? Could I like repeat this to a colleague if I did not have the screen in front of me?
Exactly.
Okay, I mean, that's a really good one. That's one where you can just be like, okay, could I? And then if it fits.
Yeah.
We're going to discuss this more into depth, but to do that, I would actually, first of all, like to ask you to please take a seat at our formidable table, because as I promised throughout the entire day, we're going to reflect back on everything that has been shared so far. So if you recall from Christina's presentation that we had this morning about all the different types of AI, from Stan's presentation that really showed a concrete journey and how they implement AI and use it in their daily, day-to-day work practice, to the presentation that we just had from Simone, we're going to take all of that together and then go back to that fundamental question, which we're all here for today, and that is really the question on how do all these insights then translate into Rabobank's reality? What does it mean for the work that you do every day? So I would say, let's get the team back on stage. May we have the biggest round of applause, everyone, in reintroducing Christina and Stan. Please come join us back on stage. Now,
you have enough space?
As I said, I have high expectations of you. I heard some muffling, some writing, some deep thinking that I saw etched on some people's faces. So as I said, for this next conversation that we're about to have, we really want to mostly take questions from you. That also includes our online audience. So to everyone that's been listening in online, I would say hi. I'm thinking that that's the camera where you will see me. Otherwise, I'm maybe facing you at my side and you're like, oh, lady. Gen Z, but not so tech savvy. But for that, I'm very happy that we also have Ruben and Jordi who are helping us with monitoring the online chat. So can we get a big round of applause, everyone, for Ruben and Jordi? You're going to keep us sharp if anything comes in. And while those hands are still warm, can we also get a big round for Debbie in the back? Because there she is. Not just for all the prep behind the scenes, but Debbie is also going to help us by walking around with the microphone to get to as many questions as possible. I would say warm welcome to you. You've also listened to each other's talks, so I would say feel free to sort of like jump into some things of the others. But I would actually like to kick it off straight away with, is there a question in the room? And we do. Team Smile. Team Smile. Oh, wow. They're asking, can we ask ChatGPT to ask questions, rule of thumb? Simone, you tell us? I think it's thought replacement. I don't think we can do that.
Yeah, it will hurt your critical thinking.
It will hurt your... I'm sorry, sir. We've got to keep Team Smile happy. Do you have a human-generated question? Not yet, but your neighbor does, so maybe we can go right here, Debbie.
Hi, my name is Avinash. Really nice sessions to follow through. I was thinking few questions, and one important one came to my mind is, once we identify a problem where AI could help us, how far we should go to actually determine the success rate of it? Are there any tips on determining the success rate?
The success rate of?
Of implementing AI to solve the problem.
Okay.
How do we evaluate, or are there any tips on?
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, you're asking when do you know if it's a viable product? Like when do you know?
Yeah, more like it. For example, the luminous examples where AI actually help determining things along the way or stopping wildfires. How much do we invest? How much time do we invest, or how do we evaluate in a stepwise process?
So do you just opt for the AI mechanism, or do you, like, what's the trade-off that you make between weighing it off and seeing how well it works before sort of like deciding to just go with the flow of it? Anybody that wants to take that question? I see some.
I can start to respond. I think a big part is that experimentation phase, especially when we look at the machine learning models that, for instance, the optimization guys use to predict volumes and things like that. Then they go through an extensive experimentation phase to validate whether the model could actually address the real business problem. And so that should be done as a first phase, quite time-bound, let's say. And then after a few weeks, they validate whether they should continue before they actually industrialize the entire solution. So that experimentation phase is really important.
Okay.
I can add, yeah. So this is very important, the experimentation, but I would add on as well that many times real life doesn't perform like we expected.
Yeah.
So experimentation, of course, is very important, but then you have to be careful at the launch to test it very well, because it might not be a perfect reflection of what you thought would happen. As far as testing the value, of course, that depends a lot on the use case, right? Some will be much easier to measure than others. And oftentimes, or at least what I've seen, is that we find a lot of analytical AI cases are more straightforward to measure the value, versus generative AI can be more opinionated, or it's very hard to come down to numbers, although you found some very good studies that break down generative AI impact into numbers, but that's not always as easy as it appears.
Yeah, maybe just adding on that, Christina, because that's actually an interesting point. Do you feel like, in particular, where do you most often see that it happens that we're over-investing in AI, whereas a more general analytical approach would actually be better suited?
I can't think of like an exact case, but I would say that when you have tasks that are very like measurement-based, precision-based, and I see people jumping straight into generative AI solutions or like LLM interfaces, etc. I don't know if we'll see it as much here, but because of I see the biggest problem in younger generations, because I work with older professionals and leadership who are very new to this, and then I work with younger generations who are born into this, and I'm also a professor, and I work with a very wide range of students, but my younger ones, the youngest ones I teach are maybe like 22, 23, and I see that everything I propose to them, they immediately jump into, okay, well, how can we do this with ChatGPT? How can it help me? And sometimes I'm like, hey, like, no, this is a basic analytics problem. You solve this with a dashboard.
Yeah.
You don't solve this by asking ChatGPT.
Simone?
Yeah, basically, what it sounds like to me is we need more ADRs. Like, before you dive in, you need to make a real, like, an architectural decision product, right? And stand out, like, all of the different, like, opportunities or solutions, and then come up with pros and cons.
Yeah.
Instead of just picking the first that comes to mind.
That's a good point. It should be the gateway to the experimentation phase, or not, depending on what the outcome of it is. Thank you so much for the question. Is there any other question that we have in the room? Ooh, Debbie, you're going to have to... oh, we also have a catch box. Maybe we can throw it right there into that corner. If you could, by the way, maybe
Can I
it's
just
nice
talk
if
in
you...
it, or how does it work?
You just talk into the box.
Oh, hello.
Hello.
And I'm going to ask everybody if you could stand up and maybe shortly say who you are and what department or what team.
Hi, I'm Jordi from Team Minions. We work on business banking, the account and transaction overview. And I mostly have a question for Simone. In the last presentation, you gave a lot of information and slides about what's bad about AI, and then you went on about what's good about AI, but there were no stats backing that up. How can I trust AI is good when all the sources I've seen is that AI is bad?
So you're asking, do we have stats to back the goodness of it up? So sharp. Thank you so much. Thank you. You may sit again.
Yeah, the tough thing here is time. Like generative AI has been available now over the last 2 to 3 years, right? So the real impact that AI has on long-term capabilities hasn't been established. So most of the research that is now available are research that are really gathered, like really boxed.
Demarcated.
Yeah, really demarcated into like, okay, so this task, how much faster can we deliver it, or how much accuracy, or how much higher score can we reach, right? It's really short term. And what you're basically asking, like, okay, the opportunities that I was stating are very much like, how can we improve, right? But as we all know, you don't learn from one day to another. It's very hard to say like, okay, you do this task and now I know what you've learned from it, right? It's a process over time. So at this moment, I do agree there are not many researchers that show the long-term implication if we will grow as humans, like cognitively grow out of it. But I do hope and expect that will come in time, but the time hasn't passed.
Yeah, and there's also the additional factor you mentioned where it matters a lot what we as humans choose to do with the capacity that we free up, right, through the usage of it. That's maybe also, but it's a really good question. Thank you for keeping us sharp.
Yeah.
Team Minions, we love to see it. I see that we have a question on this side of the room as well, so let's fetch it.
Hello, my name is Benedict and I work at Online Access Management. I'm a product owner there. I think a lot of the work that our developers do is not necessarily developing, but process related, writing SAQs, reviewing SAQs, these kind of things. How can we use AI to help in that?
Good question. Oh, I see a thumbs up from your neighbor in the front. That's a good sign. Anybody wants to...
I can say something. So everything to do with compliancy documents and stuff, where I think it can help is, one, staying more up to date, because now a lot of like reviewing SAQs, writing the security design, stuff like that, are done like, at least for the teams, on a 2-year or some 1-year like base, right? And we don't really, even though we should, but we don't really update them every time we implement a new feature, right? And I think if you use AI more integrated into the security designs and the SAQs, that it can at least trigger you more quickly, like, hey, I see your code base, I see you now made a fundamental change, you now use this new framework or this new technology, hey, you should now update again your security documentation. So it could help remain more accurate or more up to date, I would say.
Yeah. Son, Christina?
I would have to ask what SAQ stands for.
Yeah.
I don't use.
Security documentation.
Dare to ask, security documentation.
Yeah, I haven't had to do that, so.
Yeah.
But maybe if we take it more general, like the bit about that a lot of time is allocated to processing.
Taking it a bit more generally, I would say it's a challenge in our company as well to make sure that AI gets used throughout the entire software delivery lifecycle, whether it's now about documentation creation, automated testing, whether it's about checking against ADRs. We're trying to implement it across the entire board, actually.
Yeah.
And it's true that most often we start with easy code completions and then a bit of agentic coding, but actually it might have value throughout the entire life cycle. And we actually did an AI-aided engineering hackathon where some of those ideas came up, where actually you then identify agents which in the end you can chain together and you get your entire software delivery life cycle supported by AI agents.
Yeah,
so for me, there are not really boundaries to explore where it can help.
Yeah. I actually want to, because I'm getting a cue that we have some questions in the online chat, so I'm going to get you a mic, Ruben. No, that's fine. There you go.
All right. I've got an interesting question from the online audience to Simone. As there is a concern on the cognitive performance, is it wise to restrict AI tools to the junior developers in their earlier stage?
Ah, always the
example?
junior developer. Can I see hands who's a junior developer? And who disagrees with this statement and is a junior developer? No, that's a couple. Okay, but that's a good question.
Yeah.
Shall we take, sorry, was there more?
Yeah, for their initial code development journey.
Right,
So
for the
about
initial
2
code
to 3
development.
years, I suppose.
Okay. Oh, no, that's an important context.
Yeah, so there are two things here at stake, right? First of all, juniors don't have the ground of the subject matter expertise yet to validate the output of the tool. But it can help if you, like, it all matters how you use the tool. So do we learn our juniors how to use it? So for example, if you have sources, well, for all Java developers, like the OCP book Bible is hard to go through, right? But if you have a ChatGPT that can gradually like give examples, maybe to boil it down a little bit, it can help you throughout your growth, right? You shouldn't flip it. You shouldn't ask the AI to come up with all principles that are in that Java Bible, because then it can hallucinate, it can come up with like things that aren't relevant, stuff like that, right? So use your source of truth first, and then use ChatGPT or Copilot in our branch, like to help you actually get that subject matter expertise. If you ask, like, should we cut it? Should we not have juniors use it? I think that would be too harsh, also because it is all around us, and I will promise you that they will then use it on their private phones or private laptops to use it anyway.
I see some affirmative nods. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I'm giving away your identity in this, yes.
But one thing I would say, and I'm not sure if you can like enforce this on company level, but what I would urge the juniors themselves is cut the code completion. Like, don't do the automatic code completion in your IDE. Make sure that you get the muscle memory right, that you type it over, that you don't copy paste it.
Okay.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Or only five questions per day, I hear here.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, I don't work as a developer, but I can compare it to like junior data scientist or junior business analyst, something like this. I absolutely would not prohibit it. I don't think that's a good idea. They'll find ways to use it, like you said. And also because the new way of work is using AI, so they need to learn how to use it on the job.
Yeah.
But I do worry about their over-reliance, like I mentioned before, that I see young people are jumping right into it without even questioning. So I don't know what we need to do within companies, but there might need to be some sort of check or mentorship or like a journey audit system where we do checks along the way to make sure that they're getting the knowledge that they need. For a developer, it's one thing, for data scientists, it's another, but they need to be able to recognize and be able to code on their own. If the tool was to be taken from them, would they be able to produce that on their own? There needs to be a way to test that knowledge development.
Yeah, and I mean, this is sort of like us playing with the idea of new rules and structures and regulation around it. A different thing that we mentioned today is that there is already a very well-regulated environment, so to say. Stan, you also spoke to it within the context of Luminous and the work that you do and how you can sort of implement AI in a highly regulated environment. What would you say is like a very important prerequisite to make AI work in a highly regulated environment that people cannot forget when they walk out of the room after this session today?
I would first say that the statement AI in a regulated environment sounds maybe a little bit more exotic than it actually is.
Okay, do tell.
Because the foundations are still the same as with any other digital transformation that we had. You run already today mission-critical software, and that already has a couple of foundations that need to be in place. Strong data governance, strong engineering practices, clear accountability. These are the fundamentals you already have in place, and when that's good, you're already 80% along the way. Of course, you need to comply with the AI Act and implement some MLOps practices, but I would say it's really about the normal operational and data maturity, which is the biggest prerequisite, not necessarily the regulation in itself. Regulation might raise the bar a little bit in terms of reporting requirements or in terms of traceability, but as such, it boils down again to what you already do today, having those strong foundations in place.
Yeah, that's a really good one. I'm going to see, because we're racing through the time here, is there any fundamentally important... Wow. Yeah, you got it, right? You got me covered with a really good question, because I was gonna spice it up, but your hand was straight up in the air. I'm super curious to hear your question. If you could stand up and maybe also share who you are, then let's get this going.
So my name is Emma. I am part of the AI team Halo in Digital Platform.
There's a helemaal in the back. Nice.
My question is also about juniors. So if we see in companies that are less regulated, we already see that engineers are offloading PBIs that were normally meant for juniors to agents. So there's a gap creating for these juniors to learn. So what would you advise to Gen Z software developers?
I can start with something. First of all, I don't have the answer to this, but I think this is something I've been saying for a while. It's like a societal problem that we're going to have to face, because I'm not so worried about AI replacing even middle management or leadership, but I am worried about it. We've probably heard about the worries, but replacing very junior profiles. But the problem is that you create that gap, like you mentioned. The juniors eventually become the seniors retire.
Yeah.
So we need to fill that gap, and we're very, very early in this happening. So I honestly don't know the solution. I don't know if either of you have a proposal to make, but obviously we can't let this happen, but we need to find a way, because companies are also going to go to the first thing that saves them money, which is getting rid of the juniors and replacing it with agents.
Yeah, but I think, funny enough, my Scrum Master yesterday came with a nice article about AI washing. Did you hear about
AI
the term
washing?
already?
Yeah.
What does
AI
it mean?
washing?
Like greenwashing.
Yeah, it's like greenwashing, but then AI washing. So people are letting people go because they say like, okay, AI will solve 30% of the jobs, right? So we let go of the 30% of juniors because like they are not needed anymore. But it's not actually why they are being let go. It's maybe because of tariffs or more financial reasonings, right? So it's not like they label it as AI improvements.
Right.
But actually what we've seen so far, also from the reports that I also had in my slides, I could see that code actually becomes less maintainable over time if we let the AI take over, even doing junior tasks.
Yeah.
So in time, and there also has been a report where there's a lot higher need now for developers that are now 35 and over, I believe. So there's a bigger demand for that group because they can validate the AI's output. But you guys are the developers that will be the 35 in time, right? So who is going, like, we have that gap that you say, and I think it's not so much up to you, but it's way more up to management to, like, say, like, okay, that's not a future-proof solution.
Yeah, that's a really good one.
Yeah.
And I would add just really quickly the AI washing.
Yeah.
It's not just AI washing, but I've seen companies firing or laying off employees because of AI, they say, and then they end up having to hire back people because
Right.
the solutions
Yeah.
were not what they expected, and they realized they need those team
Yeah,
members back.
AI overestimation. Sorry, maybe Stan also wanted to respond to your question, so.
Yeah, I think the question and the problem statement to an extent comes from the assumption that everything else stays the same. And so, yes, we have a gap if you assume that your junior developers need to grow up in exactly the same way as we used to grow up to the people that now are the senior developers. But actually, we're going to live in another world where those people need other skills. So I think this is really the thing you need to reflect upon. What kind of people do you need when they are 30, 35, 40, doesn't matter, but what kind of people do you need to manage all of those AI agents, to manage that new world? And that's just a different skill set.
Yeah.
So it's not about, you need to stop thinking about AI solving a single problem in a world that for the rest has not changed, because that's not true. The entire world is changing around.
Right.
Then what would you advise the senior developers to do?
Maybe very briefly.
Yeah. To help.
Anybody who dares? Who dares challenge the senior developer?
I'm not.
Scary as they are.
Yes, maybe for a bit of context. So I think also that juniors are now not asking the seniors a lot anymore, because they're now offloading more to the AI.
Do you have a suggestion to the senior developers? That's also an option.
No, I first would like to hear.
I would like to hide behind it. No, I'm joking. Anybody?
No,
No, I think you had a good point at the end of your talk. What was it? Don't AI. I forget what it was. the
Yeah, I
example,
think what you're referring to is the accountability that you all are also accountable for reviewing the other one's code, right? Because, like, no?
that, and also it was, I forget exactly what it was. I was taking notes on my phone, but
Right.
it was like, don't use it to replace you, but use it, don't rely on it too much, but use it to,
To learn and
explore
grow,
and
yeah.
Yeah, to
It's the
learn.
same
and
for
grow.
junior to senior.
Yes, definitely, yeah.
Okay, that's a good one.
thank you.
Last chance, or forever hold your peace. No suggestion to the senior developers?
So I think the whole AI coding stuff will also become a real communication problem in a sense. So like how communication is always already hard, AI can even make that worse, I think.
Yeah.
So I think for the seniors, ask your
Yeah,
juniors
pair
if
up.
they understand stuff.
Yeah, that's a really
And
good
be
one.
open to questions, I think.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you. Big round of applause indeed. Now, as I said, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. We've flown through time. We're actually really out of time, but I do want to ask you one final question. If we can make like a collective deal that we're going to be as succinct as we possibly can be. This is me prompting you guys in your answers. But I was really curious. I mean, we're here now. It's the AI Enablement kickoff. There's much more to come in the year to follow. We'll hear about that in a little bit. But before we go over to that, I was curious, if a year from now, if you would look ahead of from here to next year, and we'd be here again, what is one AI-related behavior or decision that teams should stop doing and should start doing in order to really make progress?
I would look back to my previous answer actually, and that's stop thinking of AI as a single solution to a single problem, but really reimagine the way you do your business with AI natively embedded. Really rethink your processes and your your work day end to end.
Yeah, so more integral thinking about that. That's a really good one. Christina?
I would say maybe don't be so focused on the tooling, but be focused on the people, like I ended my talk on. That I think this is particularly relevant for like co-pilots and ChatGPT type things, that the companies are very focused on giving the right tools to the people, but they're not investing enough in the actual like implementation, how you're going to perform on the job with that.
Right.
And it's not just a one-time investment either. That's a continuous thing that you need to keep showing them how to use it on the job.
Yeah, that's a really good one. Simone, finally?
Yeah, I would say in a year from now, I hope that everybody for their own cognitive performances has understood that the Gen AI, the Copilot, is an encyclopedia, right? It doesn't have the facts. It's an exploration tool. So keep like interacting with the AI. Don't satisfy on the very first answer you get. Ask it to continue, like make sure that you understand it, or ask it even like, hey, can you come up with counter, like negative points towards the solution that you just suggested, right? Because even though it will sound valid, it also will come up with all negative parts of the solution that it offers.
Yeah, that's a really good one. I would say that's some concise, succinct advice that we can all stop in our, put in our pockets. That was my Dunglish coming through. But I would very much, first of all, like to ask for the biggest round of applause. Everybody give it up for Simone, for Christina, and for Sam. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.